am David the Good, and I'm in my neighborhood in North Florida, and I'm gonna go on a walk around the neighborhood and show you some of the stuff out here that you can eat. These wild plants might save your life one day, and since I know a lot of them, I might as well share them with you. And we're gonna go looking around and see what kind of stuff we can find. Come on. Okay, first of all, this is Beebalm. It is a wild plant that grows all over. You see it at this time of year. This is September. It's real easy to spot right now because it is the fall and it is in bloom. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? This is in the mint family. This is not a huge edible, but this is good for you. It's good for colds, and it's very good for making tea out of. You can just take the leaves and use them in a tea and dry them. And that's just kind of a cool medicinal edible that is all over the place and very easy to spot right now. All right, see all this weedy stuff? Yeah, there we go. I've talked about this before. This is Biden's alba or shepherd's needle. This is a healthy and edible green. I find it to be best cooked. I like to pick the leaves and saute them, and they're very filled with nutrition. You can eat them raw or cooked, but I think they're definitely better cooked. Very easy to spot because of these little flowers, and they are really everywhere. Biden's alba, shepherd's needle. All right, and here is one of my favorites. See that weird looking thing right there? That is a bulbil of Dioscorea alata. You can see the leaves up there. They are there we go. Look at that leaf right there. They are a relative of the air potato, but this one has a really good root at the base, and the air potatoes that you normally see, which is Dioscorea bulbifera, is toxic, and you don't want to eat those. These bulbils here are edible cooked, and if you follow the vine back down to the ground, which is somewhere back here in the woods, you can get roots that are sometimes 20 or 30 pounds pretty regularly, and it's a really tasty, kind of like a white potato. You just cook it like you would Idaho potato. See those leaves? They're not quite heart-shaped. The non-edible bulbifera varieties have the heart-shaped leaves. These are more pointed and arrow-like. These here are wild grapes. These are our wild Muscadine grapes. Not any grapes left on these, if there were any to begin with. There are some grapes still hanging on the vine now in September, but we're kind of coming to the end of their season. So you can see these grapes climb all over the place. They're up there on the power line. The thing with Muscadine grapes like these, the wild ones, I have heard that the sex ratio on them is like 9 males to 1 female or something along those lines. So a lot of time when you come across grapes, they'll be male grapes, which means they only donate pollen and they don't actually produce the fruit. So if you come across them, and you come across some with fruit next summer, or even if you catch the tail end of some now, remember where those are, because that's a female, and you can come back to that patch every year and almost always get grapes. Very easy to spot and hard to mix up with anything else. I mean, it's a grape leaf. Very easy. Also, by the way, the leaves themselves are edible in salads. I like them cooked, and the little tender ones are the best. Okay, here's another one. These are not the best shoots I've seen, but there's different varieties. This is Smilax. Pretty easy to spot. See the little tendrils on it? The little side leaves. These leaves are edible, and these shoots are edible, and they're a relative of asparagus. There's actually all kinds of edible stuff in here. A lot of grapes, a lot of Biden's alba. This here, actually, this is a bay. This is one of our native Florida bays. Take these leaves and break them and smell them. You can tell that they're bay, and you can use them like culinary bay. Not exactly the same flavor profile, but pretty close. This here is a cabbage palm. Now it's a shame to actually harvest these things, because it takes them a long time to get this big. But if you were to chop that down right now and cut out the center of it, I've posted another video on cleaning a heart of palm, but there is a few pounds of very prime eating in the middle of one of these things. It's a very tender vegetable. Calling it cabbage doesn't do it justice. It's actually better than cabbage, but it takes some years to get that big. And cabbage palm is pretty easy to spot. I mean, the leaves are similar to a palmetto, but they actually make a big old trunk, whereas the palmettos tend to creep around on the ground and make multiple trunks. This here's another edible. It's not the best tasting edible in the world. It's supposed to be best for jelly, but I haven't bothered because there's a lot of things you can make jelly out of, and there's only so much jelly you can consume in a year. But this is American Beautyberry. This is a pretty common understory shrub through a lot of the South. The berries are edible, raw, or cooked. My kids eat them all the time, but they have kind of a mealy flavor to them with a little bit of turpentine aftertaste. They're not poisonous at all, but they don't taste all that great. But you wouldn't really matter, or actually you wouldn't really worry about that if it came down to it. If you needed something to eat, you can eat these. And when I've gone hiking in the woods and haven't had much to eat, I've eaten a bunch of them. Okay, this right here, this is kind of a shame. These are American persimmon trees, and they were really cropped back this last year by the power company when they were clearing the lines, because they're right underneath the lines. They probably got planted by birds some time ago. These come in male and female, so sometimes you'll find fruit and sometimes you won't. It depends on the tree. If it's a female, it'll bear fruit. This one's a female here. And the thing about these fruits is they taste really delicious, but only when they're totally ripe. If you get them when they're not ripe, they're not good. These things are soft, they're delicious, and they're jelly-like. I'm not talking just partly soft. That's an American persimmon. The trunks are pretty easy to spot, and the leaves are pretty easy to spot. They're already starting to flake out at this time of year. There's a lot of fruit here. That's another plant. You can, if you want agave nectar or tequila in the apocalypse, there's your blue agave. There's some oaks here on the side of the road. There's oaks everywhere. A lot of these oaks are red oaks. The red oak acorns are just very bitter and full of tannins. That's because they hang on the tree for a long time. They'll hang on the tree for a couple of years before they drop, and they just soak up the tannins. They don't really want you to eat them, so you have to soak them a lot to make them worthwhile. Green Dean, Florida's forager at eattheweeds.com, soaks them in his toilet tank, which is kind of crazy, but it needs running water over and over again. Eventually you can eat them, but you got to get all that tannin out of there. It'll mess your stomach up. These are covered by grapevines here. If you can find white oak acorns, like live oak acorns, they take a lot less processing, and some of them are even sweet enough to eat right off the tree. I've had some acorns that were a pretty good nut, just raw, which was kind of surprising to me, but every once in a while you come across them. J. Russell Smith, in his book Tree Crops, talked about how if you could breed oaks for sweet acorns, you could replace corn and you wouldn't have to till the soil. And I think that was a great idea, but nobody ever got around to it, and it's been 100 years, which is too bad. This is palmetto. Palmettos have edible fruits, though they're not reported to taste very good. I never seem to catch the fruit at the right time. Interestingly, behind it here, there's what looks like a type of Elaeagnus. A lot of the Elaeagnus have edible fruit on them. That's your silverthorn hedges or an Elaeagnus. And they grow wild here and there. If you can catch the berries, they're usually early in the year or even in February, depending on the species. They're quite edible. They taste pretty good. And we have more beautyberries back here too. And then we have more of the Biden's alba, or shepherd's needle, on the ground. And then right here, here's another one of those Smilax. With the Smilax, I just break the shoots off where they're tender and cook them. You can get some really big shoots from some varieties that are almost as big as regular asparagus, but that's usually only in the spring when they're first emerging from the ground again. This time of year, it's pretty easy to spot. There's golden flowers here. This is goldenrod. There's different varieties of goldenrod, but you can make tea out of them, and they're supposedly medicinal. And these are not ragweed. People get them confused with ragweed. They think, oh no, goldenrod, isn't that the one that makes everybody sneeze? No. Goldenrod has pollen that doesn't spread around like ragweed does, so it doesn't cause problems. I really want to go in the yard and get those, but I shouldn't. Those are chanterelle mushrooms. Beautiful chanterelle mushrooms, and they're growing underneath the tree. They grow symbiotically with some oak trees, but I don't know if anybody's home, and oh boy, they're Florida State fans. I don't think it's a good idea to go trespassing in somebody's front lawn, but those things are very good edible. This looks like a foreclosure house here. These are often great places because they don't mow the lawns. See, there's a bunch of Biden's alba growing there, but a friend of mine, my friend Alan the beekeeper, there's a foreclosure in his neighborhood. For a few years, nobody bought it, and so the blackberries took over the front yard, and he told me he had a blackberry patch, and I was like, where? And he's like, come on, look. Front yard of a rundown house, just totally filled with blackberries. This place is looking pretty bad, but it's probably a good place to go foraging. Now, there are some members of this family that are actually medicinal. These are primroses. One of the species of primrose. There's a whole bunch of them. They're just really pretty. They tend to grow where it's a little bit moist. This area isn't particularly moist, but they look pretty happy here. And you see in between, there's some Beebalm. And this is really a pollinator's paradise, and it's what you get when you don't mow an area. When you've got a edge of the woods like this, coming into, you know, this kind of like an open herbaceous layer, this is what you want to go for in a food forest, where you've got it kind of going from dense to open and dense to open again and again and again between trees and prairie plants. It really makes for a very living and active thing. And if it wasn't kind of getting into the evening right now, I bet this thing would just be loaded with butterflies right now. Just all kinds of stuff going on in here. It's cool. You don't see this in most subdivisions. This here is a wild Florida plum. It's just a little baby one. And it's too late in the year to find plums right now. They're summer. But they're really great for grafting on top of, as you can see in some of my other videos. I graft all over them. And wild plums range from vicious, you know, unpalatable, tart, nasty things to pretty good edibles. Just kind of look around for them. There's more wild plum right there, that dark trunked little tree in the foreground. They're an understory tree, but they make more fruit when they get sunshine. Oh, just found some more persimmons. Some more up in there. It's pretty cool. It's a good edible. One of the best ones we have. Another big patch of Biden's alba. I told you this stuff was everywhere. It is just insane how much of it there is. It really drives farmers crazy. That little tree right there is a hickory. Actually, if you find hickory nuts, they are a pretty good edible, but they take a lot of work to get into. Flavor of the nut is great on some of them. Some of them are not so hot, but some of the ones I've had have been delicious. And you could just nail those things with a hammer and bust them open and get the tiny little meat out of them. I don't know, it might consume more calories than it gives you. This here's a black cherry tree. That's a native Florida tree. And you got to tell it apart though, because it's got a poisonous cousin, the laurel cherry. Laurel cherry, the fruit has little beaks on them. The black cherry, they have nice little round fruits. And they're kind of semi-sweet, semi-bitter. But they're really good for making jam and liqueur and that kind of stuff out of. Okay, this little empty lot right here, it's 3 acres of nothing. I like to call it my mushroom patch. One of the neighbors owns it. But I'm sure there's nobody else that's picking mushrooms out here. Most everybody is scared to death of mushrooms. But in this little patch right here, around this oak tree, I often find chanterelles growing. I don't see any right at the moment. Oh, there's a couple. There's a chanterelle right there. No, that is not a chanterelle. That's a look-alike. See the gills on that? And it's bleeding white. Not a chanterelle. Better know your mushrooms or you'll end up dead. This is a chanterelle. It's much rubberier. They're not true gills, they're pseudo gills. That's a little teeny chanterelle. They're always underneath this tree at this time of year. You can almost always come by here and pick a few. Find them popping up. There's another one right there. Little orange things. Really delicious edible mushroom and pretty easy to identify. I've got another video on identifying chanterelles if you're interested. Alright, so it's been a pretty good walk. I hope you learned something. There's plenty to eat out here. The biggest trouble is actually getting the staple calories. It's not really getting nutrition. There's only so much you can feed yourself on if you're just eating greens and the occasional fruit. The best one is probably that yam that I showed you near the beginning. Those guys are a great staple if you can find enough of them to eat. There's some other ones too that are pretty good. Acorns probably could be a staple with a lot of work, but anyhow, hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe to my channel, and I will see you online at thesurvivalgardener.com.